Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now here are your hosts, R. Blank and Stephanie Warner.
We are honored to have Daniel Belquer as our special guest. He is the co-founder of Music Not Impossible and Vibe Life, a company that started as a way to give the deaf community a better live music experience through vibrations on the skin. However, it quickly evolved into a new form of art called the Art of Haptics, which allows people of all hearing levels to experience music and art through the skin. Through this innovative technology, the skin becomes a new canvas for artistic expression, providing a unique and inclusive experience for everyone. In this episode, he'll be sharing his insights on how technology can improve our health and well-being and the impact that the Art of Haptics can have on our lives. Welcome, Daniel, to the Healthier Tech Podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you guys.
Yeah, we're really excited for this.
Yeah, no, this is,
Awesome.
as we were prepping this episode, this is definitely the coolest tech we have had, have covered on this show. So
thank
really
you.
looking forward to, before we get into that, you have a background in music before these projects, right? So what type of music did you work with, and when did you get started?
So basically, I got started playing the piano when I was 8 years old. But soon, I started like composing very early on. So I was always very into creating music, original music. And I was also very interested in the combination between music, arts in general, and technology, theater, and the combination of those, art forms or different languages. So I started early on doing these combinations. And as I moved to Rio, as soon as I finished, I graduated in college, in law degree, by the way. Yeah, mind you, right? Very related to the story, like, huh? Yeah. But, things from, real life stories. So basically, I started teaching music at a theater school, and I taught there for 8 years. And I started like directing my own shows and creating stuff. And also I was making a living as a composer, for theater, dance, circus shows. So I created all kinds of music you can imagine, like music from Renaissance, classical stuff, jazz, pop stuff, rock. Like I got into several different genres because I would adapt to what it was demanded from a composer's perspective to adapt to a particular show. And I was also putting out my own shows, combining the technology. I was using brainwave scanners back in like 2012, creating images in the background based on the performer's brainwave patterns, using game controllers to control the system. So it was a very natural evolution. Then I started like vibrating objects on stage because I wanted to create this kind of tactile approach to music. So that's how I started going to that direction.
That's really cool. So before we get actually into your tech, we're going to be using this term called haptics. Now, more people are aware of this term than a decade ago because of tech like the iPhone and most phones. But just so we're clear that all of our listeners understand, what is haptics?
So haptics is the technology that applies to the sense of touch, and to be technically precise, our project should be called vibrotactile. And for years I tried to push that. Why? Because haptics is a more encompassing term. Haptics also include temperature and pressure, texture, other stuff besides vibrotactile. So, thinking very technically, vibrotactile is a subset of haptics. But vibrotactile, if haptics is already a niche term, you can imagine how, vibrotactile is, right? Like nobody could like, what? No, it's just haptics. Okay, so it's easier for, the general public to understand. So I adopted the term haptics to the practice.
Thank you for explaining that. I actually didn't really know much about the word. Can you tell us a little bit more about the inspiration behind Music Not Impossible and how it evolved into the art of haptics?
Absolutely. So when I moved to the United States in 2014, I was working in a intermediate art center called Harvest Works in New York. And I was approached by, Patrick Hanlon. He's an audio engineer for Hollywood movies and all. And he was also related to Harvest Works. And we were introduced, and he said, there's this company in California. They want to create a better live music experience for the deaf. And the connection was done through Dr. Dave Putrino, which is a neuroscientist and has been a long time collaborator for Not Impossible Labs. So basically they said that, and at that point, before I left Brazil, I got a master's degree in theater, and my thesis was around listening. So, and I was already vibrating objects, as I mentioned. So I was like very intrigued by the perspective of combining the vibrations, music, and the deaf. That seemed very intriguing to me. And then I got in touch with the CEO and founder of Not Impossible Labs, Mick Abeling. And he had this idea like, it seems preposterous at this time, and age for the deaf to be having to hold balloons in concerts or being bare feet, because he realized they enjoyed the live music experience, but they seemed far removed and having this makeshift solutions. So he was like, we have to find somebody to take on this project. And I jumped in, and it's been, 9 years now.
Wow.
Sounds crazy. Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit, because I know there've been a few generations now of your technology.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that you would feel fits under the definition of Music Not Impossible, what did that do?
So that was a very early prototype that Paddy and I hacked together, using, vibrational speakers to the body and stuff like that. And it was horrible, as initial prototypes are. and it had like a very undesired effect of turning people into moving speakers. So the deaf would be at a concert and they'll be producing a lot of sound and to be disruptive. Like, this is not good. So the whole thing turned out to be much more challenging than I initially thought, because not from a technical perspective. I on the third prototype, I got a very interesting technical solution running. The problem was that it didn't relate to the music experience at all. At the time, people were saying, this is going to be the new Braille. This is going to be the new Morse code. People are going to learn it and they're going to have a great... I was like, scratch that, I think it's a great idea to produce tactile language for the deaf using vibrations, but that was not the, in my scope. The first motto I put to guide me through this whole experience was, there shall be no learning curve, because from a cultural and artistic perspective, it seemed like completely crazy to me to think that the deaf would have to go through a course like learning a language to enjoy a music concert. Like it doesn't sound organic and natural, because regardless of your culture, if you like the type of music or not, you should be able to relate with it instantaneously. It's a very primal connection. So this was the really hardcore challenge, and it took me over a year to overcome that.
So in the first version, and which you describe as under fulfilling, you translate music into vibrations on the skin. And so I'm just trying to understand, as an example, would a deaf person or hearing impaired to any degree, would they be able to tell the difference between a flute and a saxophone? Like, is there a difference in the vibration by two different instruments, or? Yeah.
So we would have to take a leap here and jump right into the most recent iterations to discuss that, because the problem is the skin relates to vibrations and sound in general in a completely different way than the ears. And that's what really struck me like as something to be understood as a separate idea. That's why I went towards the art of haptics, because it's not a subset or a byproduct of music, but it's an art on its own. And the easiest example I can think of is, think about silent movies, right? And then you add music to the movies. It makes the movies even more powerful. And actually, like, it's something so integral to the movie watching experience, right? Then you cannot even conceive silent movies anymore. So for me, attaching vibrations to music adds as a booster, but it has a life of its own. The same way that we can separate movies and music, and we can separate the art of haptics from a musical experience, but when they are together, the combination is really strong. This is a long way of answering the question, because the skin, for example, stops at 1,000 hertz, technically, right? But the ear goes.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, this is, it's white papers and science, but your ear goes up to 20,000 hertz. So you have 20,000, 19,000 hertz more. So the range for the ears, it's way larger. And the way you produce the sound of a flute and the sound of a saxophone for the ear, it's a combination of waves and harmonics that create that particular sound, and you don't have that same discrimination on the skin. It's a difference because you feel like texture. So could you differentiate sound A from sound B? Yes, but it would require, the same way as music training, right? Ear training. So for a lay person to distinguish several instruments inside an orchestra and say, oh, this is the violin, this is the flute, this is the saxophone, this is the, it's something that requires some learning and knowledge, right? And some training. So the same way with vibrations, you can distinguish stuff, but they're not one per one, like, oh, this is the flute, this is the sax. It's a little trickier because you have to build the vocabulary for people to understand that.
And so now with the newer versions of the technology, you're, I don't want to, well, I'll say it, hacking directly into the brain, right?
That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah. So this is interesting stuff. Tell us more about what that is.
So the skin is the largest organ of the body, right? And we have 3 basic receptors that react to vibrations in different frequency areas. And you have different perceptions in different areas of your body. For example, if you have a small ant walking on your hand, on the palm of your hand, you're able to detect, with your closed eyes, you're able to detect exactly where the ant is, because the hands are extremely sensitive to, the sense of touch. Not so much, let's say, on the back of your shoulders, for example. So the map of the regions of your body also have to be taken into account to produce striking and compelling vibrotactile or the art of haptics experience, because you have different ways of delivering different stuff to different parts of your body. So, for example, if you need a lot of definition and detail, you would send it to the wrist, you would send it to your rib cage area here, which is sensitive. But if you want to like really punchy stuff, you send to the back, because if you apply the same amount of power to your rib cage, for example, it becomes ticklish or even painful. So you have to, take this. It's a different organ, so you take into account their specific characteristics and create a new art form. But having said that, it's not that the skin is more limited than the ear. It's just completely different. So certain things, for example, location of sound, it's hard to pinpoint the sound of the space exactly, right? Especially if you have a lot of stuff happening at the same time. With the skin, the placement is very precise, and you can do a lot of interesting panning stuff on the body. So that's why I call our system 23.1 surround body experience. So the same way you have a 5.1 system in your home theater or something, and then you can have separation of sound in different points of your room, or in a movie theater for that matter, you can also have the same concept applied to the skin. So you can make a sensation of movement, right?
That's
And,
super cool.
yeah, and in the same way, you create the illusion of movement between the speakers. The sound is not actually moving, right? It's a series of combinations of volumes and stuff that creates the illusion that somebody's walking on your screen, on a movie screen from left to right. You can create that illusion. You can create the same illusion on your skin, that's something moving across your body, which is super cool.
So I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this next question, right? Because what you're talking about is there's a whole different, I mean, like you say, the skin is different from the ears, and there's a whole different set of variables as a result that you get to work with, levers that you can pull. So it sounds like the translation that you are doing is a very creative process, so that you, as the inventor of the technology or the executor of the technology, are actually getting to put your creative hands in. So you have the artist who's making music that's creative, and then you have the listener, and you're kind of in the middle now as a second set of creative hands in terms of how this stuff is interpreted. Am I seeing that right? Is that how you see your music?
Almost, but I'm very glad that you put it this way, because that's exactly the point. It becomes an art form in itself. So you have the creators. We call it vibro composers, vibro DJs, so vibro designers. So these people can acquire the skill set to create a very strong and interesting, compelling experience that can leverage the musical elements, but is not tied to it. So
it's not just like there's the music and then there's your tech. There's also, again, lack of a better term maybe, but an interpretive composer who can customize the experience in real time.
Yes, I would even put, because on your analogy, you put the composer of the music and then the listener, or the executor of the music for that matter, like a music player or singer, or whatever it is that is delivering the music form, and the listener. And then this vibro artist, so to speak, in between. I wouldn't put them in between. I would put him or her in the same level as the musical artist. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So at the same way the musical artist is delivering the music experience, the vibrational or haptic artist is delivering this haptic experience. And they blend together, and they create a third thing that is larger than the sum of its parts. And this is the art of haptics, and it's amazing. And so we have an idea. Sometimes we have the same piece, given to, let's say, 3 or 4 vibro composers, and they all create completely different solutions. The results are completely different. The experience for the end user, it's completely different. Some are more jarring and agitated and busy. Some of them are very minimalistic, and so you have an unlimited number of variations you could create for each piece.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's why I'm really claiming the space of the art of haptics or as a legitimate artistic space, because it's not like some pipe that you put music in and it comes on the other side ready to go with vibrations, because you have to do a number of artistic decisions in the process. Just to give a concrete example, last year we had a project with Opera Philadelphia, and I didn't compose just the music. I thought of the vibrations before the music even. And I had the pleasure of working with the Philadelphia Opera Women's Chorus, who recorded the music. And then I have a vibro composer creating the vibrations for my musical piece based on my guidance. But he also had free range on the piece. But the other 2 pieces, they involved a piano. One was a chamber orchestra, and the third one was with just a solo piano with voice. Very operatic, beautiful pieces by Teshon Sorry here in Philadelphia. One was delivered to Danny Dunlap in LA, and the other for Site 2 in England. So the way they treated the piano in both pieces, vibrational wise, was night and day, was completely different, and they're both equally strong and interesting, but they went through completely different paths. Danny Dunlap, because his piece was solo piano, he felt the need to be very precise with each envelope of each note and place them in different places of the body. So you have this evolution as the piece, becomes bolder. The vibration starts spreading across your body. It's super interesting. Sai, because he was dealing with a chamber orchestra with piano, he decided to place the piano on the wrists, and because of the acuity, so the piano stays there the whole time. It's very cool. It's just an example of a different solution.
Yeah, no, that sounds really interesting. So, and we've talked about, the music, the person creating the music, we've talked about the haptic artist, but on the other side of things, how does the user experience this, and do they experience it differently? Because what I hear, I'm trying to imagine this, and I think about, all these vibrations happening on my body, and then I think about, it makes me feel like I'm going to be tickled, and I wonder, how do people experience this? And then are you taking into account if, half of the audience is laughing because they're feeling tickled? How do you deal with the user, and how do they handle it? And then how do you deal with it in real time?
So let's say tickle, it's going to be the comedic effect, like, a sound that you can make, like, and people know they have to laugh, but it's a desired effect, and you can avoid it if you want. Not all vibrations are ticklish, right? You can go to different frequencies, and so there's a bunch of ways you can create a non-ticklish vibrational experience. So I was just 2 weeks ago, I was in Melbourne, Australia, working with a studio there and teaching them how to, create the Art of Haptics. Actually, this weekend, I have another workshop online with 26 people from like several time zones, and they're all participating as vibro composers. So you can create, you can totally focus on the desired effect. And a funny thing was that when I was there, I told them, we have a standard reaction. When people experience this for the first time, they go. And to describe
for our listeners, it was mouth agape, just wide open. That was the reaction.
And the eyes, like surprised eyes. So it's a standard solution. And I told them that was the standard reaction. And when I turned the system on, they all made this same face. And I was like, I told you, and like, oh my God, it's so, because they feel, oh my God, it's happening on my body. So I think some, possible analogy would be the invention of the speakers, right? So let's take speakers to cultures that are not familiar with the speaker, right? Like, how can you explain the sound is coming from a box, right? It's very hard to describe, right? It's insanely hard to describe. And so the musicians are inside the box, and what is this frog doing there? No, it's not here, but anyways, try, right? It's extremely hard. It's because we lack the metaphors, we lack the references to understand the experience. So people, when they have the experience for the first time, they are very surprised. And one thing that we learned over the years is that if we compare it to music and say, oh, some people, they are naturally inclined to music, and some are not, which doesn't mean people cannot learn music. Anybody can learn music. It's a very natural experience. We have rhythm, we have the melody, even as we speak. But for some people, it's easier. So these people who have the easier path to music learning, for example, they are equivalent for, with the deaf community, because they have so much sensory acuity in general that they get the experience much faster. They understand what's happening. They can pinpoint, subtle changes way quicker than a hearing person. So one very interesting outcome of the project is that we also empower the deaf community to be creators, because they can totally know what they are doing with the system, right? Because they're using the sense of touch, and they can have like a head start because they get things like that. It's very quick.
So I think I saw on your site that your tech was part of the Life is Beautiful festival. Is that right? Okay. As a former Las Vegan, I have a very positive view of that festival. I was hoping you could speak a little bit about that experience. How is it implemented? How is it deployed? What was the results?
So that was one of the most striking experiences in my life. At the end of the event, I was so exhilarated by the whole situation that when they gave me the mic and said, say, Daniel, blah, blah, Mick called me on stage and like, oh, so please, talk and speak about, how you feel. And I just said, ha! And screamed and laughed because they couldn't.
And how did that translate into haptics?
Yeah, everybody, because it was such a beautiful thing. Because for years we have been envisioning a day where we would have a room with half the deaf people and half hearing, and you couldn't tell the difference. And that's exactly what happened. And we were fortunate enough, and this, it's also due to Mick's amazing relationship skills and all, because we were sponsored by Zappos, the shoe company in Vegas, well, Tony Shea, and we're extremely thankful for the whole team, and also Avnet. So basically, Avnet is the second world's largest electronic parts distributor, and they have, they distribute like 100 billion parts per month, right? Which is like what? 18,000 engineers on staff. So they basically opened the doors of happiness to me and said, Daniel, what do you need to create this in 6 months? I was like, what? 6 months? Yeah. We have, these prototypes. No, we need more prototypes and they have to be amazing. So really? Yeah. I need this company and in the, industrial design, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you got it. So go have fun. I was like, seriously? So now we have these prototypes that we have been working with the last 5 years, and this was generated due to that event
for really cool.
For the launch of Greta Van Fleet's debut album, and actually they won the best rock album of the year at the Grammys. So it was really cool. It was a wonderful journey.
So going from there, how are people actually able to enjoy the Art of Haptics? Meaning, do they have to be at an event that supports it, or is there a way for people to just buy one and tune into a channel or an app that you have?
So right now, since last year, I completely changed the business model to be. And I turned us into like a service company, because up to that point we were like project based, right? So we would have these big events like Lady Gaga. We did her dive bar launch tour in Nashville, and so we would have these massive events, and Life is Beautiful and all, and then we would go and tweak and perfect and improve and go back and basically doing demos in between. But since 2022, we started really focusing on providing the services and the hardware and the technical and everything, like basically a one-stop shop for the Art of Haptics for companies. And we just had like a huge surge. We had many events last year. We went to Japan, worked with Toyota. They invited us to go back this year again and actually creating the Art of Haptics for car racing. So I was basically mixing vibrational music with no sound, and the cars that would pass by, they loved it,
Oh, wow.
We went to London for a Mighty Hoopla festival, like a 25,000 people music festival. Anyways, we started like doing this, but we are basically now tied to a small inventory, right? Because this was created for just a couple of hundred prototypes. So now we are full on into our mass production initiative. Actually, I had a call yesterday from our engineer in China, and he's putting up the factories and everything so we can go to mass production. That will remove the amount, the quantity limitation, but we're still gonna be working with companies and events and artists to distribute, specifically at physical events that people will attend, and then we or the organizer of the event retrieves the units, because I think we're still a few years away of going straight to the end user, due to because I don't want to settle for like a gimmicky experience. So
Right.
we are working with, for example, I have our headquarters here in Philadelphia are with Dr. Youngmoo Kim from Excite Center with Drexel University, and they are working with an AI component. So we put music in, and it pipes a very compelling experience, based on what we have provided as composers feeds, so they can analyze that. So obviously this takes time, but we can see that obviously like in the future being like a very interesting experience for people to collect, because I just don't want to like just have the bass or something. I want to have like an interesting experience
Right.
for people. So that's why we still go through the events avenue. Um, and actually, I'm starting in the fall the first The Art of Haptics course at Drexel University as an adjunct professor. So we're going to start teaching other composers to create with the system. And I would also like to thank my great collaborator and coworker Flavia Naslowski, because she has been like crucial in this whole path to turning music not impossible in this accessible business.
Right. So, how do you think that haptic technology can improve the overall health and well-being of individuals?
I would have to put my esoteric side hat.
Please proceed.
Because it's what you guys cannot believe what I have been seeing. It's so crazy. So you have an idea right now. We have a spinal cord injury trial going on in Los Angeles with one of the most regarded specialists in the world, Dr. Reggie Edgerton. He was actually the doctor that used to help Christopher Reeve, when he had the horse accident.
Yeah.
So he's very excited about that. I was able to work with Jessie Norman before she passed, and she was paralyzed from the waist down. Jessie Norman, for those of you who are not familiar, she's one of the world's most celebrated. She was, unfortunately, she passed 2 years ago, but she was one of the most regarded opera singers. And after a few months, she was moving her legs 14 inches using vibrational therapy. We have, and this was certified by Mount Sinai physiotherapist. It wasn't me who actually measured the result. It was really, really exciting. We have people working with cognitive load in Boston, MIT, and Leahy Clinic. We had trials going well with Parkinson's patients. So there's, I think this can, because it's non-invasive, we haven't seen any adverse effects yet. So it's really, really exciting. I actually helped a lady with tinnitus once, creating like a cancel frequency technique.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. I had this on video actually, like because we were in this Parkinson's event, and I had this young lady. She was early 40s probably, and she just sat on the floor, and I got very moved. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, didn't know you had Parkinson's." As a volunteer, she was actually a volunteer at the event. I said, "I don't have Parkinson's, but I have tinnitus, and it drives me crazy. I get severe nausea, and right now it's just getting me dizzy." So basically, I applied one of the devices to her ear, and have some like, "Oh, tell me when the frequency is right," and stuff like that. And suddenly she starts to cry and cry and cry. Like,
if you could, after this recording, if you could please send us that link to that video, because we are asked about tinnitus all the time. Almost every day by our listeners and our customers. So that if you could
it's
share
such a
that with
debilitating.
us, that would be,
yeah. I have to ask her, because this was not an official video. It was just with my phone. But if she's fine in disclosing her identity and all, or I can blur her face, whatever she feels like, I still have her
really
contact.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no
So
problem.
what advice? I mean, you're obviously a very creative person, and not just in the traditional way, but in seeing opportunities for the use of technology to create value and benefit and enjoyment for other people. What advice would you give to someone who is hearing you and is super inspired and they want to devote their lives to applying innovative technologies to improving people's lives? What advice would you give that person on what to do, what steps to take, what path, how to think of a path to follow?
I don't know if my recipe would apply, you know, to other people, but I can speak from my perspective, right? So I don't sound like I figured out, because I didn't. It's just something that works for me. I'm extremely obsessive with stuff, and I don't have any problems with failing and admitting failure. I have zero issues with that, and I actually think it's a beautiful thing. I like things that are half finished, and I appreciate, I see a lot of potential and stuff that people just think it's like a, you know, like a napkin sketch or something. So I think if you are part of the results that we get is due to just being, you know, insisting and trying again and falling, and it's part of, it's fun actually, you know, once you get the taste for the actual process, instead of just like, oh, this has to be perfect, I need to make this as the new, you know, spaceship or something. No, just, you know, try one thing, then, you know, once you figure that out, go to the next one, and then you start building block by block things that actually make sense and can help. And obviously inspired by, you know, caring about people, liking to see people being, you know, getting benefits. This is such a huge and rewarding, you know, relationship. You see like people crying and getting so happy. Like the deaf community has been outstanding. Like the experiences I have had with them over the years is just brings tears to my eyes, because it's so wonderful. So if you feel rewarded by, you know, feeling the energy of other people's, you know, getting their lives touched or improved, or even amused, you know, for a few moments, I think that makes everything worth it. And you cannot lose the the perspective when you are too much on the weeds of frustration and things not working at all, or getting, you know, on fire or exploding, or because this does happen sometimes. So yeah, I actually have a video of my, you know, like with a fire extinguisher in the back of Not Impossible. Just
I'd like that video too, but for
I
different
do
reasons.
have it.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, this has been a really fantastic interview. It's I mean, it's, like I said earlier on, this is by far the coolest technology we have covered on the Healthier Tech podcast, but the way in which you've spoken about it is incredibly inspiring. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Where would you like our listeners to find out more about you or connect with you?
So they can go to our website at musicnotimpossible.com. And, you know, get in touch. We have the email there. People can.
I think I think it's actually just notimpossible.com. Is that? Or am I looking at the wrong one? I just want to make sure we get the right one recorded.
You are. So let's make it simple. Flavia at notimpossiblelabs.com. So Flavia Naslowski is the person who, yeah, that's easier. Naslowski with Nauslaski. Sorry. My God. Okay.
Yeah.
Marker Flavia at notimpossiblelabs.com. FLAVIA. Sorry. Yeah,
okay, great. We'll make sure that those are in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So yeah, thank you again. This has really just been fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Inspiring. Super inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I absolutely love the work you're doing, and I would really love to experience it for myself. But
yeah,
also
I'm waiting for the demo unit that I was promised when we made this booking. No, I'm kidding.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
No,
I festival.
Yeah, and I love to you know, I'm doing demos is part of our daily operations, so I'm happy to give you guys a demo. Where are you guys located?
We'll cover that off air.
Yeah, we're all
Okay,
over the
yeah.
place.
Not a problem. So in November I'm gonna be releasing my album, with my songs, um, and it's gonna be the first album completely enabled with the Art of Haptics. So I'm very
Super
excited
cool.
about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
very
Super
cool.
cool.
Yeah,
Maybe
we'd love
we'll
to-
have you
we'd
on
love to
again
share.
for a listening
Yeah.
party.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
that would be
great.
actually really fun.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd
thank
love
you
to.
again, Daniel. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, this has been great. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good one. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye bye, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech Podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in the show. Please like and subscribe to the Healthier Tech Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Get your free quick start guide to building a healthier relationship with technology and our latest information at healthiertech.co.